Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL 950 AM, 100.3 FM. And you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. And on your favorite podcast platform, just check those out. And remember, if you're looking for us, look for Catholic Audio Media as one word, unless you're on Spotify. Then it's Catholic Audio Media as three words. Either way, you will find us. So, in any case, we are here talking about the Synod of Synodality that will be coming up next month. And here in the United States, there's been a lot of tension and confusion out of it. And part of the confusion has been sowed by groups and even some bishops and cardinals who do not support the Synod of Synodality. I should say some cardinals, but I'm not really putting that much of a plural on that. There's one specific cardinal who's been mentioned by all these groups in they're citing him as the one that they follow, whereas pretty much everyone else is, as cardinal, is seeking to do what the Pope is saying. And so we're seeing this tension here in the United States. And as I explained yesterday, part of the tension is coming from two different models of church. So you have the older model, which is fine, which is what is known as a top-down model. In other words, this is what the church teaches, and this is what we're called to believe. But in the history of the church, you've also had a bottom-up model, and the two of them have worked together. So people will start a devotion, or people will start a belief, people will start an understanding, and there's a word for that called sensum fideli. So let's take, for an example, we as Catholics believe that Mary was assumed into heaven. And so we recognize some of our devotional days, including the Feast of the Assumption. Well, a lot of that started with the lay people and putting their, not the teaching per se, but putting their devotions together. And then eventually this bottom-up model comes to the magisterium, and they look at it and they say, these people are right. Let's put this into our calendar, and then you see that it is declared a holy day of obligation. But usually it takes, as the saying goes, the church moves in centuries. So it usually takes along that line. But everything starts from the laity moving up. And here in the United States, because we always had a great number of priests, which is a dwindling number now, but a great number of priests, everything was focused on what does the priest say? And you'll even find people who hate the church who are trying to tell people, no, we have to change the church teaching because we don't want to live by that standard. And you go, you hate the church, you don't go to church, you have nothing to do with the church. Why do you care what the church teaches to begin with? Because you don't follow it at all. But somehow there's this important understanding that we have to follow what this authority says, and we have no other response. And this is this clash that's going on. No, obviously, but you maybe put it this way. But church teaching comes from centuries of understanding the wisdom of God, centuries and absolutely at this point millennia of understanding the wisdom of God. So it's not a case where all of a sudden the Pope wakes up tomorrow morning and decides that Catholics will no longer eat toast, for example, and that's not going to happen. But we're going to say that Catholics are no longer going to eat toast. And then we all have to follow this rule. It doesn't work that way at all. It's a great devotion that happens over time. And, I'll give you even a better example since he's from South America, the Pope. If it ever came up that it was decided that, similar to other religions, that Catholics cannot drink coffee. This is all hypothetical, so please don't assume that you can't drink coffee. Catholics cannot drink coffee. Well, there's a bunch of us, myself included, who will say, that ain't going to happen. Trust me, I'm not giving up my coffee. But see, that's not the way it works. it works over time that people look for these devotions. And so this idea that all of a sudden the church is going to come up and say, this is the new law and you have to follow this law, it doesn't work that way. But what may happen is a change of discipline, a change of understanding. For example, it is the church law that you cannot eat meat on Friday, but here in the United States, that law only applies for Lent. Well, why doesn't it apply for the rest of the year? Because the bishops determined that not eating meat on Friday wasn't that much of a sacrifice, so they encouraged people to do some other form of sacrifice. Because if you really think about it, here in the United States, if they say no meat on Friday, you go, okay, then I won't have a pepperoni pizza, but I'll have a cheese pizza. It's not that much of a sacrifice. You can see that. But the general discipline and everything is still there, and the rule still applies in many countries throughout the world. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. We're back, and don't forget our website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com, or also our parish website, StAnthonyAlston.org, StAnthonyAlston.org. So we're talking about the Synod of Synodality, and the whole thing is clashing here in the United States on models of the church. So if you have people that have determined that we know better than you do, which you can find in the secular world in many of our universities that make all these declarations, you're going to do this. It's the same model. We know better than you do. Well, actually, I don't think you do. And that becomes a clash here in our country. Well, the clash in the church is pretty much the same thing, where people are saying, wait a minute, are we going to say that the laity have a voice in this church to the level that other people do? That's actually an ancient Catholic teaching, because, as St. John Chrysostom said, the same Holy Spirit that came upon you at baptism was the same Holy Spirit that came upon the apostles at Pentecost. So the Holy Spirit works through the whole church, and the real role of the bishops is to help to discern the voice of the church, and that's what the Synod is all about. But in South America, because when I was in Ecuador, and that was in 1990, there was one priest for every 50,000 people. I think the numbers are different now and not improved. So there was one priest for every 50,000 people. So the lay community had a powerful role in the church. And this is something that didn't exist here in North America. I don't know about Canada. In North America, because you had so many priests, you had a priest in charge of the youth group, you had a priest in charge of the altar service, you had a priest in charge of the Bible study, a priest in charge of the parish, a priest in charge of Lady Sodality. You had all these priests because you had so many priests. A lot of parishes had 5, sometimes even more priests. So you had a larger group of priests who were involved. And this is something that it was the North American model, whereas the South American model was almost the exact opposite. And so, you would have a priest who would go from parish to parish while the lay community would be there running the parish. And again, I saw that in Ecuador as well, where you had what is known as the catechist, which up here we call the director of religious education, who was basically the one who ran the day-to-day operations of the parish, and then the priest would come in and do the sacramental work. In South America, because the priest may only visit weekly or monthly to the parish. So you had that. And then you had people who were also working with the catechist to be the leaders of the parish. And so, for example, when I was in Ecuador, we'd go into a place called, I forgot the name, but it was way out in the in the forest. I mean, way out in the forest, where it wasn't unusual to pass. I guess it was an anaconda, big, huge, enormously huge, bigger than I've ever seen. Black snake, yes. Those kind of areas. And then the other leaders would see that the priest was coming, and they'd set off homemade fireworks, homemade bottle rockets. That was their version of telling people the priest is here. And then the priest would hear confessions and then celebrate Mass. And it wouldn't be on a Sunday. It would be another day. Meanwhile, the parish was run by the lay community. And so that's very common in South America. And this is something that when you have this reactionary group that believes in running the church with an iron fist, even among the laity, that doesn't fly. That's where your clash is. So you have the reactionary group, for example, those coming out of Texas saying, wait a minute, you're telling me that every baptized Catholic has the same dignity as I do? Yes, we are. That's what the whole message of the whole church teaching is all about. That's what baptism is all about. We're going to talk more tomorrow. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.